So, as I was reaching the end of my college semester and staring at what my randomized wheel of every Disney movie landed on and contemplating, okay, how in the world am I going to get anybody in the year 2025 to click on some movie about a Disney movie from the 40s that they've never heard of in their lives? I remembered, oh yeah, there's actually a brand new Disney movie that's coming out right now that everybody's talking about. Maybe I should talk about that while it's popular and everything so that people actually, care about what I have to say. So, I went to see Zootopia 2 in theaters, and going into it, I I'll be honest, I had heard some positive things because it had been out for like a few days by the time I went to see it, but I was going in pretty skeptical because one, we have been in quite the drought when it comes to quality Disney movies lately. Um, you already know, if you've been around my channel before, you already know my thoughts on Ralph Breaks the Internet. I consider that a train wreck, but pretty much every movie since Ralph Breaks the Internet, aside from like I guess Encanto, have been pretty weak because they've either been cash grab lazy sequels or they've been really, really half baked, like Raya, Wish, all that. And on top of that, Disney sequels are pretty notorious for being not good. Obviously, there's, like, again, the theatrical stuff we've been getting lately, but even aside from that, like, there were all kinds of direct to DVD Disney sequels back in the day that if you talk to just about anybody, yeah, they're not good. I haven't watched every Disney sequel, thank goodness, but the ones I've seen are enough to tell me, yeah, they're not that great. So I went into Zootopia 2 with pretty low expectations. Like, I wasn't expecting a train wreck. I wasn't expecting like Ralph Breaks the Internet level disaster, but I was not expecting anything special. And oh my goodness, I have never been happier to say I am wrong than about this movie. Because wow. I I genuinely think this is the best Walt Disney Animation Studios movie since honestly the first Zootopia, and it might even be better than the first Zootopia. I'm I'm I can't believe I'm saying that, but oh my goodness, they actually nailed it. I'm gonna get into why, but I'll just throw a quick little spoiler warning right here. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm gonna be diving into the actual story in this video like I've done in my previous ones. It's been out long enough now that I think I can do that, but if you haven't seen it yet, this is your warning to click off because there's going to be spoiler territory because I have so much to cover here. So right out of the gate, I think one thing this movie did really well that a lot of sequels, like not just Disney sequels, but sequels in general, really mess up is feeling like because you always want the sequel to be the continuation, right? You want it to be a natural continuation of the story and the characters and everything. And a lot of sequels will, like they will start off seeming that way, but then you just immediately see a lot of backtracking and a lot of regression, and it because they're trying to like create a new conflict where the first story like wrapped everything up in a nice little package. It's like, okay, how do we create a new conflict out of this? And a lot of sequels just kind of wimp out and just recreate the old conflict again. And I was a little nervous they were going to do that with this movie when I was watching the trailers, and they had this whole, like they kept repeating this thing with Chief Bogo saying he was going to split Judy and Nick up. Like there was going to be that same tension from the first movie where Judy's trying to prove herself as a cop, Bogo's being the angry guy at the top who doesn't believe in her, and then she and Nick are gonna do all the wacky hijinks, improve themselves, and yada yada yada. To my surprise, that is not what they do. They 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 start you off like literally right where the first movie ended. Like they show Bellwether's arrest. You actually get a bit where they show her in court, and it's actually pretty great because they just have her go completely nuts and like tearing up the courtroom and throwing a complete tantrum, and it's great. Like I honestly hated Bellwether as a villain in the original movie because that twist just came out of nowhere, and then we barely got to see her be evil at all. But we actually get a few bits from her in this movie. Like she's not like a major character or anything, but they do kind of sprinkle her in little moments here and there. And now that we know that she's evil, they play up just how completely unhinged she is. And it's honestly one of the movie's best running gags. It had me dying every single time she was on screen. She's more entertaining as a gag character than as an actual villain, which is a little sad, but I'll take what I can get. But anyway, going back to how this movie takes off from the first one. So like we have the Bellwether trial, like they're all talking about like, you know, Judy and Nick, like the first Bunny Fox cop duo making like uncovering this massive conspiracy, this like worldwide phenomenon case that's like, you know, they've made them heroes and everything, but as a natural consequence of that, Judy and Nick are kind of, I don't want to say full of themselves, but they are, you know, they're riding on that high, you know, like having just finished finals. Like, you know, when you finish your semester and you got through all of your finals just fine, you're riding on that high, and then something else happens and you just kind of dip back. That's kind of what happens here. Like they are riding high off of their success from this major incident from the first movie, and so they are like eager to keep doing like big cases like that, especially Judy. She's like, yes, see, I've made the world a better place. I can keep doing this. And so they get a little over eager, and they end up busting an operation that they weren't supposed to be anywhere near. And they bring back the little dude from the first movie who Nick did his whole little hustle with, like pretended his friend was a baby in order to like manipulate people's emotions, everything. They do that again, and it's really funny. But yeah, the whole thing's a bust. They technically catch the guy, so they didn't completely fail, but they cause all kinds of property damage, and you have people immediately starting to doubt their capabilities again, which I was a little annoyed by, in the sense that, I mean, one incident is enough to start undoing all this progress they just made, but they also make the case that, like, you know, I'm pretty sure they straight up say at one point, like, you're one-hit wonders, get over it. Like, yeah, you made one big case, but you're not as great as you think you are, yada yada. But yeah, so like, as I'm worrying about that, I'm worried, oh, are we gonna do that thing? They actually surprise me here, because Bogo, who was like the big obstacle for Judy for like the first 2/3 of the original movie, like he was sort of the representation of all of the discrimination and all of the doubts that Judy had were because of the stuff Bogo was doing, because he just kept talking down to her, kept saying, no, you're a meter maid, you're just a little bunny, you can't do this, yada yada. They actually make his like character arc from the first movie, where he gets over that and realizes Judy is a good cop and knows what she's doing. They keep that intact. Like he reprimands them for their mess up and everything, but he also takes time to just talk to Judy and says, you know, you annoy me, and I'm really mad at you right now because you messed this up again, but I'm doing that because I actually realize now that you are a good cop. Your methods I don't always agree with, and You're a little overeager. I'm trying to tell you this because I like you and because I want you to keep doing the work that you did in the first movie. I want more of that. You're a good cop and we need you. Just chill out. And just like that, like my biggest fear going into this movie of retreading the first one all over again is gone. And then they actually kind of, in order to make sure that stays intact, Bogo is actually kind of taken out of the picture at one point, like in order to frame Nick and Judy as part of like the big conspiracy in this movie. He gets like knocked unconscious and then they get framed for like attempted murder or whatever, which is bonkers. But yeah, they keep all of the progress intact just with realistic consequences. Nick and Judy still solve that case, but that doesn't automatically mean that they're the best cops ever. Bogo realizes that Judy is a good cop, but he's also still a stern authority figure, and Judy isn't perfect, and he's trying to like make sure that, you know, things stay like, especially considering that we're now on mayor number 3, like having at least a little bit of stability in this city would be nice. So after all of that happens and we get into the actual plot of this thing, another major point in favor of this movie, and one of the things that makes me argue I think this is actually better than the original movie, is they once again are uncovering like a massive conspiracy within this city, and it's involved with the same kind of discrimination and the same kind of like us versus them and all that stuff that the first movie was preaching. But they do a very good job this time around of not beating you over the head with the message. I like the original Zootopia, and I think the message that it tries to preach of not judging people on appearance and like all that stuff, that's a very good message that honestly everyone, but especially kids, should probably hear. But I do think the first Zootopia could be very unsubtle about it. Like it gets really awkward in some places, like the bit with Judy saying like, you know, a bunny can call another bunny cute, but when other animals do it, there's all kinds of weird little dialogue like that. And then the actual conspiracy of that movie is a little convoluted because they have to have 2 different corrupt mayors in order for the plot to make sense. Like it was kind again, I think the first Zootopia is a good movie and the overall mystery element works. But some of the messaging and some of the conspiracy stuff going on in that is a little heavy-handed. This time around, it is a lot more streamlined. It is simply a case of, you know, you have these lynxes, the Lynxleys, very creatively named, who claim to have been like the founders of Zootopia, but the big cover-up with the snake character that was in all the advertising, Gary, like he's trying to expose, is that actually his, I can't remember, I think it was great-grandmother, was the actual founder of Zootopia, and then this family stole the plans for the city and then murdered her in cold blood so that they could have all of the power and all of the riches and authority, and they were able to pin everything on the reptiles and like basically ostracize them from society so that they could have all the power and all the wealth. And so Zootopia became an all mammal community and shunned the reptiles, and so they're just kind of on the outskirts and everything. And that's it. That's the entire thing. It's way more simple. They don't beat you over the head with all of the different, prejudices and everything. They just give you a straightforward story with a straightforward conflict and simple motivation, but it's also a very real world thing. If you study history at all, the rich stealing everything for themselves and using a proper scapegoat and ostracizing them from the rest of society, that is a pattern that has existed pretty much throughout all of human history. So you are getting a very real world problem that children need to be watching out for, but you're also delivering it in a way that feels mature and nuanced without like screaming it at them and like shaking them like, do you get it? But yeah, it's, you know, it's good. And then all the stuff with Nick and Judy also ties into all of this prejudice, because just like before, there's, you know, all this tension about a bunny cop and a fox cop, but it's not in the same way before. It's not like people are now still hating Nick because he's a fox, but there's all this stuff about like, you know, are Nick and Judy really as compatible as they think? Because you'd think after the first movie, okay, yeah, like they're doing great, but like because of their riding the success of the first movie, they sort of, you know, get a little too confident, and then they have a lot of disputes back and forth that lead them into all kinds of trouble. And then once they accidentally get themselves involved in this conspiracy with the Lynxes, and the Lynxes frame them for attacking Bogo and everything, there's suddenly this big divide in the way they want to do things, because Judy is still who she was in the first movie of like, I need to make the world a better place no matter the cost. I have to go. And Nick, he's still getting used to all this. He's having a lot of doubts and a lot of, you know, is this worth getting myself killed over? You know, and so there's like a genuine tension there that builds up into a, like, you know, your typical like friendship breakdown scene, but it's actually handled really, really well in this movie. Like, there was a moment that gave me flashbacks to Ralph Breaks the Internet, but it was in a like, wow, this is like Ralph Breaks the Internet if it wasn't stupid. Because they have them like climbing up this cliff and arguing back and forth, and they have like the little pen from the first movie where Judy was where they had like the recording of Judy saying that she really is just a dumb bunny, and it's sort of like, you know, the symbol of their partnership and everything, because that was how she got Nick back after their friendship breakup in the first movie, was that whole thing with the pen. But then as they're fighting over it and as they're bickering back and forth about this whole mess, suddenly they accidentally drop the pen and it breaks on the ground below them. Again, just like Ralph Breaks the Internet, there was that whole bit with Ralph and Vanellope where they were furious at each other, and she took the little hero medal and threw it over the railing and it broke into pieces. But here, the conflict actually makes sense based on the characters as we knew them in the first movie, and has proper nuance, and it's Ralph Breaks the Internet but not stupid. It's great. And then of course they eventually work out their differences in the end, like once things get really bad and once they get into their whole life and death situation and get out of it, like making sure the other two are okay. They have this reconciliation that's really sweet. It starts out really sweet, like them, you know, just admitting everything that they should have admitted at the beginning in order to properly communicate with each other, like confessing their inner doubts to each other. And then it just, like, it starts out really cute, and then it just becomes hilarious because after their initial little confessions, they just keep piling it on back and forth until they're both like sobbing and hugging each other. That genuinely got the biggest laugh out of me, out of anything in the movie. That was great. So yeah, really good on the story, really good on building on the character dynamics from the first movie, really good on continuing the themes of the first movie, but in a more nuanced, mature way. What else is there to talk about? Well, as any good sequel does, this one tries its best to expand the universe. I mean, we already talked about the reptiles and the lynxes, but the other side characters, there's not a whole lot of other ones aside from like the ones in the main conflict, but you do have, already mentioned the mayor, who is played by Patrick Warburton. So first of all, welcome back, you absolute legend. It's no crunk, but it'll do. I actually like this guy because at first he's sort of under the thumb of the Lynxes, and it's like, oh goody, another corrupt mayor. But he actually like gets over it. Like he's sort of intimidated by them and like strong armed into helping them with their evil plan until the climax comes, and they had this whole thing with him at the beginning of the movie where he had been like a movie star and everything, and like like an action hero, but not really. But here, when he gets over his fear, he like actually becomes a true hero in real life and just beats them all up, and it's pretty great. It kind of reminded me of there's a similar horse character in Home on the Range, which is a garbage movie, which I'll get to at some point. But like he had a sort of similar, like he had this guy he admired and wanted to be a hero like him, and then like eventually learns that guy was bad, and again like fights back and becomes a true hero. It's sort of like that, but in a movie that's actually good. But yeah, so Patrick Warburton horse, fantastic, love it. There was the beaver Nibbles, who I was a little unsure about at first when they introduced her as like, one of those like online conspiracy theorist people. But once they actually brought her into the plot, she was hilarious. Like every single bit with her was fantastic. The snake that was in all the marketing, Gary, who's like the center of the conflict, was honestly probably the most boring new character. He wasn't bad. He was likable enough, but like he's just kind of there. He moves the story along. He's likable. His whole family history is like pretty reasonably tragic, but I didn't really get much personality from him. But he's again, the actual story they tell with him was good. He was kind of whatever to me. But the big new character in this movie that I have just got to talk about, and this is the big spoiler, like biggest spoiler of the movie. Paubert is genuinely the best Disney villain since King Candy, which isn't a high bar. Like that, I'm not saying he's better than King Candy. I'm not gonna go that far. But like, ever since Wreck-It Ralph, we have not had a single good Disney. They have all been trash because they have either been half-baked twists that didn't work, or there were movies with no villains like Encanto, or you just had weird mixes at like trying to be sympathetic but also be evil, like Magnifico, who's just a complete embarrassment. We have not had a good Disney villain in eons. And when I was sitting in the theater and he just suddenly snapped on them and turned on Judy and like knocked her down, it was like, whoa, wait, they did it? They actually got me with one of these twists, and the villain is good? Like the problem with most Disney twist villains, aside from the fact that we barely get to see them be evil, which is another thing they fix, they do it early enough to where you get to have him as the antagonist for the entire final act. The other problem is they just don't do a good job building up their motivations in a way that makes sense. Like, Hans does stuff throughout Frozen that actively contradicts his motivation and his evil plan. Callahan, is a mostly sympathetic villain, but then has no care at all for Tadashi's death for some reason. Bellwether, we barely even get to know anything about why she's doing what she's doing. But Paubert, they actually give you a motivation that makes sense. Like he's sort of like he's introduced as sort of the nice member of the Finksley family, like where all the rest of them are these like evil conspiracy, like big rich monsters. He's sort of the token good one. The like, my family is abusive and awful, and I want to help Gary uncover the truth because that's just the right thing to do. But then it turns out he's helping them find the original deed to the city so that he can burn it and make sure it stays buried forever. And the reason for that is because his nice guy persona at the beginning actually wasn't entirely an act. Like, he's genuinely, like, he's not a good person, but he's that whole like nervous, kind of awkward persona was not just an act for the camera. He's genuinely intimidated by the rest of his family, and he's scared about living up to them. And so his whole motivation is just a desperate desire to please them and to fit in. And that works perfectly as a contrast to the conflicts that heroes are going through, because like Nick and Judy's whole thing is realizing that them being different from each other isn't a problem. Like, they have to work through those differences, and they're not always going to agree on everything, but the whole like conflict of this movie is opposites attract, and you know, like working through your differences. And you know, there's the whole thing with the mammals versus the reptiles, again, the whole discrimination thing. And Pavert, as the villain, is so desperate to fit in with his family's expectations that he will resort to all kinds of nonsense just to please them. And that's just so refreshing. It's so refreshing to have a twist that makes sense and works within the themes of the movie and isn't just there for a gotcha. Like, thank you, Pavert, for being a villain that actually makes sense. And as an extra bonus, he even does one of Hans's stupid scenes better than Hans does. Because one of the things in Frozen that always annoyed me is Hans doing his whole little smug speech, and then he does the dumbest villain cliche of all time, where he just leaves Anna in the room and doesn't kill her. Is like, I've already succeeded. No, you haven't. If anyone walks in there and sees her alive, your whole thing is ruined. But here, Albert does leave Judy alive and like walks away, but it's because he literally doesn't have any way of actually doing anything. Like, all he had on hand that he could get his hands on was something that would like knock her down and leave her like not dead, but basically unable to move. Like, so he doesn't have anything, like he doesn't have a venom that can kill her, but it's enough to take her down. And so he leaves her there. Like, they do the villain cliche of leaving the hero but not killing them, but it actually makes sense here because he's on a time crunch and doesn't have the resources to finish the job. Like, again, this movie is fixing other dumb Disney movies that I didn't like. Like, it fixed Ralph Breaks the Internet. It's fixing Frozen. Like, it's fixing the parts of a good movie, Zootopia, that I didn't like. Like, am I going crazy? Disney sequels aren't supposed to fix things. They're supposed to ruin everything. What's going on here? But yeah. Other notes. Continuing to talk about other characters. I think the way they handle the side characters from the first movie, they do a good job with each of the original movie's side characters of reminding you of why you liked them and giving them their little moment in the spotlight, but not taking away from this movie's story. Got Little Toot Toot as a gag at the beginning. Bellwether pops in here and there for like really over the top, insane cameos without, hijacking the plot and becoming the villain again, because that would have been stupid. Clawhauser gets his little moment of helping Judy and Nick out at one point. He's, just the same likable guy. The crown jewel, though, has to be Flash. Because, if I'm going to be honest, the whole, sloth bit in the first movie, it was really funny on a first watch, but I got so sick of how they ran that joke into the ground, and so anytime I've seen Flash in any marketing or anything since then, I kind of just rolled my eyes. But I'll be honest, the way they handled him in this movie was hilarious and fantastic. Like, they didn't overdo it. They gave him his one moment, like Nick is needing to get over to where Judy is because, all the cops are after her and everything's going down for the crazy final act. And he knows from the ending of the first movie when they caught Flash speeding like a maniac, he knows that Flash is a good driver. Or not a good, but a fast driver, I guess. And so he gets Flash, and then they take off, and it's this crazy sequence with him being like a Grand Theft Auto driver. It's ridiculous. Like, Flash kind of steals the show for a minute, but then he just pieces out. He's like, okay, I've done my part, you do the rest, and then he's gone. And it's just, yes, that is how you do it. That is how you properly utilize people from the first movie without taking away from the new movie. You let them have their moment to shine. Remind the audience this is a character we like and why we like this character. Even give them a little more than they had before, because we never really got to see Flash. Like, we saw a little bit of his driving as a gag at the end of the first movie, but now it's being utilized in the story. Again, it's like, am I losing my mind, or did Zootopia 2 actually nail it? Good story, good new characters, good old characters, fantastic villain, great character arcs that properly expand from the first movie. This is the best Disney movie in years. I cannot believe I'm saying that about a Disney sequel of all things. But you know what? In terms of where I'm putting it on my tier list, I'm giving it an A. And you know what? I'm going to even put it above Winnie the Pooh 2011. Because as much as that one has a special place in my heart as a Winnie the Pooh guy, I am so floored at how much they just nailed it with this movie. Just knocked it out of the park from what I was expecting. So yeah, it's at the top of the list now. It's just a really good movie. Like, and better, I would say better than the first Zootopia. It does a really good job with expanding on the world, continuing the themes of like overcoming prejudice and overcoming personal differences and all that stuff. It does a really good job of expanding on that and improving on what the first movie did right and fixing what it got wrong, which is what any good sequel should do. That's all I got. I guess next time I'll finally cover, Make My Music or whatever, because that was what my wheel landed on. Still not sure anyone actually cares, but I'm gonna try, because I made a pledge to do every Disney movie. I'm gonna do every Disney movie, but that's all I got.